Jake, my 6-year-old son, had recently embarked on an exciting trip to Disney World, accompanied by my parents and sister. While I was preoccupied with work, I received a disheartening phone call from Disney's Lost and Found department. My heart sank when the representative informed me, "We have a child here who says his name is Jake." The relief that he was physically unharmed quickly faded as I listened to him on the other end of the line. His small, trembling voice recounted the distressing moment. "Dad, they left me and went home." In disbelief, I called my mother to confront her about the situation, hoping for an explanation or at least some concern. Instead, I was met with laughter. She dismissed my panic, nonchalantly stating that they had only searched for him for about 10 minutes before deciding to leave the park because the other children were tired. The notion that they could leave a 6-year-old child alone in a bustling amusement park sent waves of horror through me. How could they prioritize their comfort over safety? Frustrated and anxious for Jake's well-being, I reached out to my ex-wife, who was equally horrified upon hearing the news. She offered to assist, and I quickly booked a last-minute flight to Orlando, knowing that the cost was worth it to ensure my son was safe. When I arrived at the Lost and Found Center, the sight of Jake running into my arms, sobbing, broke my heart. The staff explained that he had been alone for nearly 2 hours before anyone in his party realized he was missing. They had attempted to contact my parents multiple times, but there was no response. After ensuring that Jake was settled into a hotel room, I texted my mother to inform her about our plans to fly home the next day. I deliberately chose not to mention that I had already consulted a family law attorney regarding the situation. The following morning, my parents showed up at our hotel, their demeanor clearly annoyed rather than worried. My mother continued to downplay the incident, insisting it was merely a minor mistake, while my father echoed her sentiments, claiming that I was being overly dramatic. When Jake hesitated to approach them, I recognized that we needed to leave immediately. On the flight home, I made 2 vital decisions. First, I resolved that my parents and sister would never again have unsupervised access to Jake. Second, I decided to take action against their reckless behavior. Once we returned home, I filed a formal report with the Florida Department of Children and Families, DCF, using the documentation provided by Disney as evidence of their negligence. During my consultation with my attorney friend, I learned about grandparents' rights in our state, realizing that they had virtually none without my explicit consent. Just 3 days later, my mother called, furious that I had reported them to Child Services. She recounted how they had been interviewed like criminals and demanded that I drop the matter for the sake of the family. I stood firm in my belief that their actions had endangered Jake's life and could have led to severe consequences. My sister joined the conversation, threatening to sue me for defamation, claiming that I was trying to tear her down. I firmly stated that defamation requires falsehood, and I had evidence to substantiate my claims. In the ensuing weeks, my family resorted to threats and guilt-tripping. My mother attempted to show up unannounced, desperate to see Jake, but I refused her entry. My sister, in response to my actions, sent a cease and desist letter through a law firm, which my attorney assured me was meaningless. Unbeknownst to them, I had been quietly building a case against them, amassing recordings of our conversations and screenshots of their dismissive text messages. I even secured statements from 2 Disney employees who had witnessed their departure from the park without Jake. Tensions escalated when my sister filed a complaint with my local contractors board, falsely alleging that I had performed shoddy work on her friend's house. This baseless accusation forced me to take time off work to address it, ultimately costing me income and clients. Feeling the need to take the offensive, I reached out to my ex-wife, who quickly drafted a supportive letter through her attorney, reinforcing my decision to restrict my parents' access to Jake. Next, I contacted my brother-in-law, who had remained eerily silent throughout this ordeal and had been led to believe a completely different narrative. After sharing the documentation from Disney and playing the recordings for him, he was visibly shocked. He expressed regret for not questioning my sister earlier and revealed that they had argued about whether to cancel dinner reservations to continue searching for Jake. As the investigation progressed, my parents and sister were officially cited for child endangerment and neglect. The report highlighted their blatant disregard for Jake's safety and their lack of remorse during interviews. For my sister, the consequences were even more severe. As an officer of the court, the Ethics Committee of the Bar Association took the incident seriously, leading to her being placed under review, formally reprimanded, and reassigned to a non-client-facing role at her firm. My brother-in-law, now fully aware of the truth, insisted on marriage counseling. During those sessions, the therapist pointed out a pattern of entitled behavior in my sister, which had been creating tension in their marriage. Meanwhile, my parents faced social repercussions as they were active in their church and community, where they had always presented themselves as devoted grandparents. When the truth came to light, they were asked to step down from their committee positions. 3 months after the incident, my sister filed a petition with the court for grandparents' rights, claiming I was alienating Jake out of spite. She listed herself as their legal representative. My attorney quickly countered with the full documentation from Disney and the findings from DCF, including security footage that captured my parents and sister laughing as they exited the park, completely unconcerned about Jake. The judge dismissed their petition almost immediately, stating that their actions demonstrated a profound lack of care and responsibility. The fallout from the incident continued to reverberate. My sister's marriage ultimately crumbled under the strain, and her ex-husband sought primary custody of their children, citing the Disney incident as evidence of her poor judgment. When her law firm learned of the details on the divorce filings, they convened an emergency meeting and, given the implications of child endangerment, requested her resignation. She was left with no choice but to accept a position at a much smaller firm, facing a significant pay cut. Months later, my mother reached out again, attempting to arrange a family reunion. I remained resolute in my decision not to attend, explaining that Jake was still uncomfortable around them after everything that had transpired. My mother insisted that family should forgive, but I countered that true forgiveness requires acknowledgement and remorse. Their refusal to apologize made any reconciliation impossible. As time passed, the family dynamic shifted significantly. To clarify my stance, I created a private digital folder containing all the documentation and shared it with key family members who had been pressuring me to reconcile. The response was immediate. My aunt, one of my parents' most vocal supporters, called me in tears, apologizing for believing their version of events. Many cousins were appalled, and within days, the narrative shifted. My parents and sister found themselves increasingly isolated, even within the extended family. The annual Thanksgiving gathering was relocated to my aunt's house, with my parents receiving only a perfunctory invitation. 9 months after the incident, my sister's divorce was finalized, and her ex-husband was granted primary custody, with her allowed only supervised visitation until she completed a parenting class. The custody evaluation cited her concerning lack of judgment regarding child safety, as demonstrated by the Disney incident. Jake, now 11, emerged as a resilient child with a strong sense of right and wrong. Although the Disney incident had been traumatic, it imparted valuable lessons about standing up for oneself. He maintained a cautious relationship with his grandfather, limited contact with his cousins, and felt no desire to see his grandmother or aunt. For me, I no longer felt like the black sheep of the family. In standing up for my son, I discovered my voice and established firm boundaries. Those willing to acknowledge their mistakes remained in our lives, while those clinging to entitlement drifted away. 2 years after the incident, my sister's legal career showed no signs of recovery, and my parents' social circle had contracted significantly. Then, unexpectedly, a letter arrived from my sister's oldest child, now 14. She expressed that she had never forgotten that day and apologized for not speaking up as her mother hurried them away after leaving Jake behind. She asked if she could reconnect with Jake. After careful consideration and discussions with Jake's therapist, I agreed to a supervised meeting. When the cousins cautiously reconnected, the warmth between them grew, but it was evident that the trauma from that day still lingered. 5 years after the incident, my father experienced a serious health scare. During his recovery, he seemed to reflect on the past and called me, sounding older and more subdued than I had ever heard him. He admitted, "I was wrong. We were all wrong. I should have gone back to look for him, or at least stayed at the park until he was found. I'm sorry." It was the first genuine apology I had received from any of them, and while it did not erase the past, It marked a significant step toward healing. We agreed to a cautious, supervised visit. My mother, however, remained unmoved, insisting that apologizing would be akin to admitting guilt for something she insisted was merely an accident. My sister, still embittered by her diminished circumstances, refused to take any responsibility. As for Jake, he has worked through his fears with the help of therapy and emerged stronger, learning to navigate relationships with a keen sense of trust and boundaries. The Disney incident, while a significant trauma, became a pivotal moment in our lives that reshaped our understanding of family, responsibility, and the importance of standing up for those we love.